United States Olympic Committee, Development, Enhancement, and Sustainability of Expert Performance in Sport Conference, 2008. A. Mark Williams, Ph.D., Liverpool, John Moores University. Anticipation skill. Williams starts off by saying, as athletes move up to elite level status, many of the physical, psychological skills of other advantages are balanced out, and other advantages are balanced out. Research has shown elite and sub-elite athletes show no difference in visual acuity or being able to see things with eyes. Elites, as described by the United States Olympic Committee, is top 8 in the world. Elites, however, perceive movements, actions, and skills better, largely due to experience. Elites can read situations better than sub-elites, generally based on practice, training, and repetitions. Perceptual and cognitive skills. Key findings on anticipation skill. Number 1, ability to pick up advanced visual cues. Experts or elites are able to use past experiences to detect disguises via perceptual and cognitive skills of training, practice, and repetitions. Number 2, superior pattern recognition skills. Experts can see meaningful patterns and structures better than novices due to past experiences, training, and practice. Williams tested this in a lab with video and proved experts recognize plays, positions, movements, skills much better than novices. Number 3, more effective visual search strategies. Experts are looking at different things than novices, likely due to the first 2 key findings on anticipation skills. Also, Williams tested this in a lab with visual equipment which tracked what experts versus novices were viewing during sport performances. Williams' research suggests experts are constantly searching and looking for cues, positions, and movements to anticipate. Cues and positions and moves for advantages during performances. Number 4, great expectations. Superior knowledge of what is likely to happen even prior to visual information provided in Williams' video tests of actual games and competing. Experts have a higher likelihood of predicting scenarios on Williams' video tests and can predict better due to experience, training, and practice. All above anticipation factors were researched and tested in labs by mostly videos of actual games and competitions or very similar game-like scenarios, which is pointed out because a lot of times testing is not done with high-performance training athletes. It's usually done in laboratories with college freshmen, sophomores, and juniors, not necessarily elite athletes. Number 5, enhanced awareness of tactical opportunities. Film-based simulation tests research suggests experts' eyes are scanning fields of play for next move, position, action, versus novices whose eyes are typically fixed on action right in front of them. So I'm just going to sum up the key findings of anticipation skills. There were 5 of them, and the idea behind that, or at least what I got out of it, is I don't think it's all that super duper, ridiculously or hard to understand, but what I'm going to suggest now is, because they put this through a laboratory test and they've used films from past games of experts, for the most part, scientists like to, prove things that are actually, have happened based on the evidence, and this is how they come up with most of their theories. I'm suggesting that, to me, it seems like an expert would be able to do a lot more things just based on, what they've found, and this research sort of proves it. Again, the idea that an expert can do something better than a novice is largely based on their experiences, right? They will be able to anticipate things based on information that they've actually done and or seen before, which a novice, by the nature of that word, may not have ever seen before. So a large portion of this anticipation skills may not have anything to do with sight. It may largely be based on past experiences because they have already been there and done that. Perceptual cognitive skills. Novices. poor problem representations for decision making in game environments. Intermediates have better action plans for problems during game environment. Elites have action plans, current and updating information for processing game environments. Anticipation is not a visual skill. It's a perceptual cognitive skill that combines pattern recognition, postural cues, and situational probabilities, which leads to anticipated judgment. Player differences. Each player or athlete is different and individual. Thus, some will have more of one skill than the other. That is, one athlete may be better pattern recognition or better at pattern recognition, another will be better at perceiving partial cues, while still another will be better at predicting situational probabilities. Sport differences. Follows the logic of last paragraph, or player differences. That is, football may require more attention to pattern recognition, while tennis may require more focus on postural cues, and wrestling at the end of the match may need higher levels of predicting situational probabilities. Additionally, each different scenario of a competition may require shifting more focus on perceptual cues or perceptual cognition of pattern recognition, postural cues, and situational probabilities. An example in most sports of different focus requirements of perceptual cognitive skills would be the start, middle, end, or extra time or overtime of competitions. Just going to do a quick review again of that perceptual cognitive skills, and the author Williams talked about 3 different levels, basically novices, intermediates, and elites. They all perceive different scenarios and skills and movements, and everything basically is different in their mind. And I'm pointing that out largely because there are a bunch of different individual differences that each athlete may have. People can be of the same skill set, but they may actually perceive things differently. Now, if we're taking it into, you're breaking it, you're segmenting, or you're segregating it by skill level, now you've got novices, intermediates, and elites, which they could have different perceptual cues as well. The other idea is, even though these are the perceptual cognitive skills that we're talking about, pattern recognition, partial cues, and situational probabilities, I guess his tests and research suggests that each athlete, based on skill or just individual athlete, may have different skills or strengths and weaknesses of those 3 particular perceptual cognitive skills. Again, pattern recognition, postural cues, and situational probabilities. So if they can get better, or they are better, if they've got all 3 of them, they're really high, you'll probably have a really good indication of anticipation skills. On the other hand, some athletes may have lower cognitive perceptual skills, thus they may be stronger in another area. Again, I always like to point out the sum of all of the characteristics is what makes an athlete elite. In other words, one individual may be much better at perceptual cognitive skills, where another individual may just be a great athlete, and another individual may be a combination of them both, and the sum of all of their characteristics is what actually makes them elite. So you may have, let's say there are 10 or 12 different characteristics, and in this example I'm just using numbers so it can make sense. 90 to 100 is an elite athlete. So out of 7 of the 10, maybe 3 of them, they're very low, and the other ones, they're very high. As long as the sum equals 90 to 100, this is how you get elite athletes. Of course, again, it's up to the coach and the athlete to figure out which areas that they need to strengthen and actually move forward. At what age do these differences emerge? Williams used perceptual cognitive tests of temporal occlusion, situational probability, and pattern recall on 9 to 17-year-olds, sub-elite, and elite soccer players, and found that ages 12 and 15, pattern recall was different for elite and sub-elite athletes. Williams used questionnaires and interviews on 9-year-old elite and sub-elite soccer players, and found that elite players had already accumulated 3 times the amount of practice time at academies versus sub-elites. He believes this practice may lead to more of the right experiences that assist in perceptual cognitive abilities, which positively affect anticipation skills. Anxiety tests. Williams used anxiety as a barometer for assessing perceptual cognitive skills, and found sub-elites and elites fixate on the right or wrong things, which affects performance. It was not clear how the tests were administered, and the tests possibly used questions and interviews. 2 areas for developing anticipation skills have been identified, and they are: number one, processing of contextual information or reading the situation, and number two, knowledge of the situational probabilities or using experience of past situations to predict more effectively. Williams tested soccer players using video-based instruction to determine if the two areas just mentioned are true. What he found is that by showing older or soccer and field hockey players videos and instructing them to look at the postural cues, the players were able to increase their anticipation skills on the lab tests and field tests. Training players to recognize patterns of play. Coaching or film simulation based on the quantitative match analysis. Or let me review that. Knowledge of situational probabilities can be developed by watching opponents on video and structured coaching or film situation based on quantitative match analysis. Performance analysis. There are several skills to help coaches, players perform better. That is, those techniques count moves and help predict or forecast. Plus, they can track other athletes' performance, which is helpful for scouting. As an aside, football has been useful or using film and video to help performance for several decades. Information from film sessions can be tracked, measured, and quantified to assist performance. I'm just going to review some of the stuff that has been mentioned over the last several minutes here. One of the ideas or theories and principles of training is training actually can accumulate over time, and you can get better just because of training, and the accumulation of training is what some people actually call training age. In the prior discussion, he suggested in his test show that when you have elites versus sub-elites, they're actually kind of looking at different things and they can actually see different things, and his determination was because the younger elite players had been in sport practicing longer, their anticipation skills were actually better than sub-elites who had not been training as long, who were unable to anticipate certain things. And I liken it to the first discussion where it could be a number of different ideas behind the reason why that could be true. One is if the athletes accumulate training over time, they've seen those situations a number of times, which means they're better prepared for them. Or two, they may just be better at anticipating things. So for me, there are two different kind of concepts going on there, but I want to point out that practice accumulation is real. Like, think of you being in school for several years or someone else being in school for several years. If they started school as a ninth grader versus someone that has gone through kindergarten through ninth grade, one may likely be better prepared for 10th grade versus the one that just started in ninth grade. However, individual difference sort of suggests that, some students are very adept at being able to pick up cues immediately. So just because a kid hasn't been in school doesn't mean that they can't pick it up. I'm pointing out that 9 times out of 10, training and or education is accumulated over time, and with anticipation skills, much of it could be the same way just based on past experiences. The other big concept for me was film study or film review or video review. I used to do this at the Olympic Education Center, and I found it to be very, very good. In other words, athletes sometimes don't know actually what they did, and when you show them film, they're actually able to discern or identify, okay, maybe I actually did do that. A lot of times actually, because it's I think it's difficult when you're being constructively critical with some people, just again based on individual differences. Some people can handle criticism very well. Some athletes, they can't handle it all. That's why I think film and video, they become the third eye. So it's not you being the coach saying, okay, let's work on this needs to get better. They actually can see it, and then it's not such a big deal. In terms of film video for anticipation skills, when you review film with an athlete, now they can sort of see it before it actually happens. If you do this over the course of a year and or their career, athletes can actually watch films by themselves once you point out what they should be looking for. In this case, we're dealing with anticipation skills. Now they can anticipate what the next move is going to be, especially if you've watched film over a number of hours with that specific athlete. Anticipation training, unanswered questions. Measuring transfer. Prior to describing his transfer measurements, Williams says elite athletes have similar skill sets, strength and power, but technical and psychological abilities separate the elite athletes. As a scientist, Williams says he needs empirical evidence before he will recommend anything, which alludes to his lecture and the ability to measure effectiveness of his recommendations. That is, his recommendations stem from lab and field tests which show or do not show a high correlation and or transfer from tests to playing fields. Other transfer measurement tools: field-based testing, subjective rating scales from coaches, performance statistics, simulation training with video and field-based testing. Conveying information. Implicit and explicit approaches seem to be used the most. Explicit instruction example: if then do, plus video on court tracking. Problem-focused training is more implicit in nature and is more like guided discovery. Williams' research with video instruction and on-court training suggests implicit approach has best transfer to field and competitions, and explicit approach seems to show best learning during practice. Williams says this is true because we're giving them the answers. Scheduling practice. Specific versus variable, blocked versus random. Williams will discuss these topics in the next talk and says those concepts affect athletes' perception and cognitive skills. Imagery. Studies show that the brain's visual portion is affected in a similar as the real observation when imagery is used. Developmental considerations. Williams ends his lectures with a rhetorical Q&A and suggested that more empirical research needs to be done to answer when is the right age to start, when is the right skilled athlete, expert versus non-expert, for anticipation training and perceptual cognitive training. So the last segment here before the Q&A, I'm just going to review that again. Measuring transfer, and for scientists and for people that are in the education field, transfer is a big deal. In other words, what we're doing in practice, is that going to transfer to the field? What we're doing in class today, is that going to transfer to the test? Otherwise, you're wasting your time. So it's very important that we put together drills and or skills and or training that transfers directly to the game or competition. Otherwise, we could actually be wasting our time. In regard to anticipation skills training, the same concept applies, right? So we've got to pay attention to what we're doing, why we're doing, and how we're doing it, and then evaluate it with some type of measurement tool. Or we may be doing things in practice in terms of training them how to anticipate that do not correlate and or transfer to competition. So that becomes really important and is really the focus of many of these audio notes. A couple of other concepts I think that are worth reviewing again are implicit versus explicit teaching and or coaching, and guided discovery. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on those concepts again because the prior audio notes kind of dealt with them, but I will say this. Implicit training is more like guided discovery, which will prepare the athlete better for competitions, and the explicit approach appears to be best for learning during practice. So if you pair those two together, which I think you want to try to do, because something is working really great in practice does not necessarily mean it's going to have a transfer, which was the first discussion, for the competition, if we're talking about the explicit approach to teaching and coaching. Whereas the implicit approach to teaching and coaching is going to better prepare the athlete for the competition, although the practices may not look great, and you'd have to go back to that last audio notes to really, get a better description of implicit versus explicit. But again, although the implicit type of teaching coaching may not have the best looking practices, it is more going to prepare the athletes for competition on game day. Actually, that's what we're really looking for in terms of measurement and transfer from the teaching and coaching. Q&A and summary. Williams suggests there are minimum standards for skill sets, that is speed, strength, technique, anticipation skills, etc. And each athlete has the minimum. Thus, all levels may not be the same. In other words, some athletes may compensate for lower or higher skill sets or game intelligence. That is, higher strength, lower speed, higher anticipation skills, etc. Accumulation of practice hours can assist all athletes in specific skill set, or more practice time will increase game intelligence or anticipation skills or any characteristic that needs attention or is low. Women in sport. There appears to be no gender differences or no evidence, according to Williams, that shows men anticipate any better than women. Again, he suggests accumulation of practice may be the important factor for variances and differences of anticipation skills for men and women. Transfer of skill from drills. Williams says the way to train for competitions is to train as specific to the sport as possible. Some drills may have very little or no transfer, which could mean coaches and athletes could be wasting time on certain drills during training that do not directly help or enhance game intelligence or competition performances during games. Williams goes on to say athletes may actually develop different skills with certain drills or types of training that show little to no transfer, which again may not be helpful for competitions and is a misuse of time. So that last segment there kind of reiterates what I was saying earlier over the last two reviews, in as much as coaches and athletes need to make sure we're doing the right thing so when it's time for competition, we are highly prepared. Otherwise, you could be wasting time. I guess that's the importance of that last segment there. The other idea that was reiterated again is that some athletes will compensate for the skills that they do not have, meaning someone could be quicker where somebody else may be stronger, whereas someone may have great anticipation skills where someone else may have a better combination of skill and strength. The idea that minimum levels of most of the sporting characteristics are met, that's what makes the athletes elite. If they don't have at least a minimum requirement, first they've got to go get those minimum requirements, which to me means mastering the basics of whatever that skill set is. And then, of course, each athlete is going to be an individual, where some athletes are going to come, they're going to come in the sport with massive amounts of strength, speed, etc. And whereas some athletes will come into sport with massive amounts of anticipation skills and cognitive, perceptual skills. Again, the coach and the athlete need to ascertain which skill sets need to be improved and work on those, which skill sets need to be maintained and continue the maintenance for those particular skill sets.